Well, hello and welcome, everybody. It is that day, voting day, November 5th, 2024. And we are joined for this Digital World Town Hall meeting with a live guest. We're grateful for those from all around the world, from Canada, Australia, to Mexico and the United States. And today we're going to primarily be focusing on some of the things that we've been doing, but majority of it is going to be based upon actual live data from the United States of America elections for the President of the United States. Grateful for the hosts that join us. Both Wally and Elle are on tonight. Terrence is checked out in a way, but we're grateful for all those that help. Again, for those that haven't joined, this is a private membership association. Some of the things that we'll talk about may be forward-looking statements and real live stuff. Some of the things we discuss are primarily based around secret combinations and how they get into different parts of the ecosystems, whether that's insurance or finance or pharmaceuticals or healthcare or media or tech, and then how they basically go in and take over governments. Some of this may sound eerie based upon today being the actual night that the votes are taking place, at least for 2024, for the next 4 years. But we talk about this almost every single week. We talk about on the left how these private secret combinations basically influence different industries and then control governments and monetary systems and policy. And he who creates, or she who creates the money, creates the rules. And how decentralized systems can actually provide an alternative to that, but how there's also a responsibility to make sure that there's a balance between governance and government and freedom and really the government ecosystems. We talk a lot about how it can actually become reality. So it's not just this nebulous thing, but how using encryption keys connected with an individual and derived keys can actually make that a big topic. And so the topic of today is an election of two individuals and two parties, but really there's much more at play here. There's some people that talk about this is just another generation of an historical regime, and other people that talk about negativity of things that have already transpired. My personal prediction is this, and it's not transpiring this way, but I believe this before the night is over, or the week is over, or the month is over. I predict that Mrs. Harris will actually stay in the White House, even though President Trump receives more real votes. So real, live, honest votes. And some of the things we'll be talking about is this conversation to see if it's actually real or valid or not. Why? Because as we talk today, we start seeing some of these things transpire, such as, real-time voting that's coming in. Some of it's not done, some of it's done, but we're seeing it real-time actually transpire. So this is actually where we currently are. We're at last time. We'll go ahead and break. And actually, I'm going to share this screen so that our listeners can actually see it real fast as well. So listeners, we are basically focused in on what was seen here. And then I'm going to refresh to see if this actually has any kind of update. And it doesn't. So what we're seeing are light blues that are basically tentative, dark blues that are supposedly permanent. And this is the reporting that the real world would have say this is actually happening. In my opinion, not any, but a majority of third-year-olds or third graders, so about 8 years old, could probably figure out how to cheat based upon the rules within this environment. And I'm not just going to say this is all about cheating or twisting, because what's happening here is you're actually seeing somebody that's in the lead as it's reported. But I think it's going to be very interesting as we watch things through the night. And we're at 6:30 Mountain Time. The time zone's just clicked into Mountain Standard Time, or the opposite. But it is November 5th, about 6:30, and I look forward to just being a part of history. And I hope you all do as well. So any thoughts, feedback, comments? The prediction that I had earlier, here, I'll go ahead and pull it up for our listeners. And this is what my comments are. I would welcome any other predictions or thoughts. And again, it is basically that President Trump will actually receive the majority of the votes. And ultimately, there'll be something that will actually twist this so that it's not realized this way. So any thoughts, disagreements, feedback, anything from anyone?
Are you saying that Trump will get the popular vote and she'll get the electoral vote?
I don't know how it's going to pan out. I don't know how any of that's. I don't know the exact. There's other people on here that have analyzed it much more than I do. I just look at it from a pattern with Obama, a pattern with what happened the first time that Trump got in, and watching that night. I actually remember my wife just bawling. We were living in New Zealand, and Mitt Romney went against Obama for the second term, and she just bawled. And when we analyzed it, it was like, how is this? And then when we looked at it, later on with Hillary and Trump, and then continue fast forward with Biden, this isn't the first time. And so all I'm basing my prediction on is just history. So I have, no data point. And then there's also thoughts based upon, if things basically pan out one way or the other. So anybody feel different or, agree or disagree or any other thought process?
In that election that you mentioned with Romney in Philadelphia, not a single vote was cast for Romney. That's just statistically impossible.
Not one, huh?
Not one.
Well, I know Skousen in the state of Utah has at least one. I know that for sure. So that's a different conversation. That's a very interesting observation. And I think if I remember right, Philadelphia is actually already, let's see, they're saying.
They're very blue. Yeah.
Yeah, they're already there. So other thoughts, comments, feedback?
That wasn't.
I just have some comments, Michael, on that.
Say again, Beck.
I just have some comments. I guess my viewpoint is on the decentralization part of it and how we can realize what decentralization is versus identity politics and have that self-determination mindset.
That's very interesting that you would bring that up, because that is basically my next point. Here, I'll show you, because you're totally spot on. And that's something that has been realized in this time frame that we don't really understand. And what I mean by that is it's not just a two-party system like they want us to believe. Blue versus red, Democrat versus Republican, right versus left. Because of what happened in the last financial crash, 2008, there's a whole nother ecosystem. And what I mean by that is decentralization, and what I've got represented here is Bitcoin. By the way, a close buddy of mine created this. Artificial intelligence actually created this image of 3 people or 2 people in the Bitcoin itself. But the point that I'm driving at is decentralization can give humanity an option and a voice, where I believe that if we don't realize anything by the time this night is over, voices matter, and the ability to actually truly see if they're real is important. I would throw out there that when we look at some of these different ecosystems and fast forward maybe a couple years, maybe a couple quarters, these are the types of things. So Ripple has put, and the leadership behind Ripple has put a lot of resources and effort behind Mrs. Harris. Ethereum was actually selected as a platform from President Trump, and really his supporting family and some of the World Financial Network. And I believe that, I've met him before, and I truly believe that intent is right, but I don't know that he's lived in this ecosystem enough, at least yet. I hope that, in the short period of time that he gets the opportunity to dig into it. We've actually got a meeting in Mar-a-Lago, which is in Florida, for those that are not aware, in 10 days. So on the 15th of November. So regardless of kind of what happens here, we look forward to meeting with him. And one of the goals and objectives is actually to be able to pull the digital world into an ecosystem. And so if that prediction, let's just talk through it. If the prediction sways towards Kamala or Mrs. Harris here, I believe that the probability of success of the digital world and decentralization in general actually has a higher probability of adoption. Now, why do I say that? Because the technology within Ethereum is slow and expensive. The technology within the Ripple environment is fast and inexpensive. The problem is I shouldn't make statements, especially from tonight. There's a lot of risk in this conversation, but I believe that the technology behind this is solid technology. The intent behind it may not be the right thing. And time, as my father-in-law would say, time is the great healer and great revealer. And I believe that the technology that is the digital world is built on, which is a third of the Ripple environment, I believe that it will be easy to actually get the mainstream adoption of this, because this technology will actually be what a lot of systems actually start adopting. And the ability to interface these two, it's not just a technological standpoint, but it's an easier adoption standpoint, because there will be so much chaos and drive for people to actually get behind something that is an alternative. If Trump were to lose and Kamala or Mrs. Harris were to actually stay in the White House, I believe there's a higher probability of adoption of decentralized systems. The question is, will they be centralized, decentralized systems, kind of like what Ripple's looking at, versus others? And then on the counter side of it, within the Ethereum-based environment, we've got a lot of work to do to be able to make sure so the probability is lower to help drive awareness, primarily because we've been trying for 3 or 4 or 5. I remember meeting with Mr. Trump, or President Trump, probably 3 years ago. Showed him the clear phones, went through decentralization. He connected me up with his chief of staff, and wonderful interactions. But ultimately, the ability to be able to make an indent in a print is very difficult at this stage. So I look forward to a future where that gets easier, primarily around adoption of services, identity, wallets, reputation, health, payments, counsels, notaries, passports, marriage, forensics, mortgages, productivity, all of these different types of services that tie into these ecosystems. So I'll go ahead and break there. Any thoughts or feedback on this as it relates to any of the topics? You guys weren't seeing it. Let me show it to you real fast. So this is, you guys are so patient. So this is basically what I was showing here. So there's a third player. It's not just a right or a left, but there's a decentralized where people can they can choose with their ability to purchase. They don't just necessarily have to choose on a ballot that no one really knows, but they can choose based upon using decentralized or local currency purchases for local assets. And what I was showing here was the probability of adoption within different ecosystems for the digital world to be adopted within different realms, depending on who's actually in the White House, so to speak. So anybody have any thoughts or feedback on that?
My feeling is that whatever she does is going to be centralized. I cannot imagine that she would allow, or she's just a puppet, but whoever is controlling her, I can't imagine that they would go for decentralization. I cannot even begin to imagine that. That's the scary thing. I think we're going to be more and more centralized with her and her group in power.
I completely agree with you. And the reason that I believe with her in power, the probability goes up is because people will have limited choice, and moving to decentralized technology will be much more important to them, because over the last decade, it's been mind-boggling to me how people just haven't really cared, how they haven't engaged, how they haven't, it just blows my mind. And so I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but it's not necessarily a higher probability of Kamala or the regime there of adopting it, because I believe that they'll adopt centralized systems. But I believe that the centralized systems that they're going to force feed everyone, and the ability to integrate into those and have a true decentralized option actually becomes much more viable, important, urgent, and real. And I think there'll be a lot of people that'll get behind it. Now, I hope all of this is 100% wrong and Mr. Trump is in the White House and we can literally just start cleaning things up and just start forcing, I shouldn't say forcing, but start providing options. Forcing is absolutely not the right thing, because this is all about choice. But so I'll go ahead and jump to the next topic, which is pretty key, because that gives you an update on what we've actually been doing. And what that is here. So we have been focused on rolling out physical and digital assets. And what I mean by that is the ability for you to take something that is actually a physical asset like silver and gold, particularly silver and gold, and then being able to convert that into digital receipts that represent those assets that can be shared and spent worldwide. And the way that that actually works is in lots of different things. So automobiles, credit cards or credit, homes, as well as other recreational type things, and how that asset can actually be managed and notarized and titled and insured for not just this generation, but also for next generations. I don't know if you're familiar with what's happening over in Europe, but they've got massive taxes on farms and estate taxes as they're being pushed from generation to generation. That's another way for the government and states to become stronger and the individual to lose their voice, which is really against every principle, at least that I know, whether it's constitutionally based or others, but basically rolling out this system here. Last night, we actually spent a lot of time within the minting environment and bullion environment and starting to make a lot of advancements there, especially as it relates to the ability to actually manage these in wallets, whether on a web interface or on a mobile interface, as well as exchange them. So those are the things that we've been working on recently. And it primarily ties to what's happened historically. You know, today in 2008, which was another time when we had elections and we were about 100 billion in unrealized losses and debt within primarily the housing and commercial industry. Fast forward now here in 2024, we're $750 billion in unrealized debt as of the end of Q3 2024. And it's going to, so it's 7 times, even if you're conservative, there's a big difference there. So this ability to be able to have real assets that are actually moving people off of a decline in the US dollar and buying power, and then onto something that is accretive or inflates with value is important. So those are really the topics. We're talking about elections. We're talking about assets and management. Any feedback from anybody? Thoughts, comments?
So if I'm in Montreal, Mike, if I'm in Canada, Michael, will I be able to purchase some of these silver or gold coins and then have a certificate, load my, or hold those in my Clear wallet, and then if I want to load my credit card so that I could, or my debit card really, and I want to use it, will I be able to do that?
Good question. So this meeting here represents Mexico, Canada, Australia, and it just so happens that we have a guest, Richard Dick, who I'm grateful that this is the second time he's on, so I don't know if we call him a guest, but he actually helped roll out a lot of the systems there in Canada. And one of the things that we're going to announce is we actually plan on rolling out the Canadian country. And so you will actually have a Canadian wallet, not just a Clear wallet or a Clear Life, but Canadian Life. And so you would literally be able to have what we call, so if CAD represented the Canadian dollar, you would have a DCAD that represents the digital Canadian dollar. And the way to be able to buy that is exactly what you just talked about, where you can actually do a bank wire, you can do ACH, you can do credit cards, and you buy gold and silver, and you literally get this digital CAD, or you can convert it into other assets. So here, I'll pull open this interface, and as we kind of look through this interface, you'll be able to see more. And I know I'm not sharing, I'll share real fast.
So when? I'm ready. Let's go.
I know. So am I. I mean, it's actually, so I wish, I was going to do this earlier, because last night was a very special night. As a matter of fact, we had some special folks that were at the Mint. So now think about, I wonder if I can, I wish I should have, I knew I was going to want to show these photos. So we had think about this, there's only like 6 or 7 mints in the United States left everywhere. And so we're at one of these mints that we're basically working with to create the clear mint and the clear bullion store, and then be able to actually layer the digital environment on top of it. But last night we were able to actually see for the first time creating these actual coins. So they're full silver pieces, how they actually get created, how they get melted, all of it, and then how they get designed, how they get actually dropped in huge presses. The weight of it is just amazing. And so there's a couple of our team members that were able to actually get that done in real life and real time. And so I didn't know this until I started digging in, but in Utah, the second export is gold. And the silver's up there as well as Nevada, which is one state just to the west. And the combination of Utah and Nevada has massive amounts of gold and silver. So the actual process is to create these and then literally store them, but then they can be digitally sent around the world. Now, the next phase of this goes to, and I really believe that this whole election process, and again, here, let's jump back over and kind of watch this election. So now Trump's at 101, just totally amazingly way outside. So he's 16.9 million votes compared to 14.4. What's important is the states that he's winning and the electoral votes associated with it. So he's absolutely dominating. And I'm glad that we're recording this because it's going to be interesting to see. Because remember, my prediction is just the opposite here. So it is literally and I really hope I'm 100% wrong. But my prediction here is that Mrs. Harris, who's the underdog, will actually ultimately stay in the White House. And if that's the case, I believe that there's going to be a lot of these people that are literally sitting here, this 16, what is it? Here, let me go to the live stuff. This 19 million votes so far. And what are we at? 54% versus 45%. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this because this is a very interesting occasion. So we'll see if that actually becomes a reality again. I hope I'm emphatically wrong and Mr. Trump is president again, and we can start digging out of the reality that's currently we're all facing, so to speak. So other thoughts or comments or questions? That was a really good question, and I hope that you valued the answer, so to speak.
I totally did. I'm so excited about the DCAD. You have no idea. Richard, where are you located?
I'm in Utah and Alpine, Utah.
Oh, okay. So, Michael, let's say I have a silver coin, but I want to exchange it for one of your coins that has a digital certificate. And will I be able to do that?
Yeah, so there's actually, so remember I told you about there's a mint that makes it, and then an actual bullion coin dealer that actually will trade and it's not here. I'm going to show you some things here. So this was actually, I didn't share. So let me share again. I really don't like this Google tech, but we have to use it for the scribe stuff for the future. So what I'm going to show you here is basically the outcome of some of these efforts, okay? And the outcome is ultimately credit. So you're actually getting credit based upon purchasing physical silver and gold. The credit will break into different environments. A real-time debit card, autos, homes, and then a couple other elements that we're yet to announce. But behind it, so when you actually come up here to the store, you're going to be going over to this bullion environment. And this bullion environment is like a coin dealer / pawn shop, where you basically have things that can be sold or loaned or borrowed or credited in 3 different forms. First, it's in a coin form. Then it's in a bar form. Then it's in a foil form. So those are the 3 different forms, and they will come in 2 different types, silver and gold. They will represent different countries, the Hawaiian Kingdom, the Hopi Kingdom, different states, different regions, different kingdoms, different countries. And the other side of it is it will also be able to cross-pollinate with existing things, the South African cougaran, the Canadian maple, or the fine gold side of it, any of the buffaloes, so there's basically silver ounce coins, whether gold or silver, will be able to be traded back and forth. And there's a pneumatic value that will also tie to some of these assets. So for some of you, that may mean nothing, but what you see here, this is a good example. So this digital USD, so you basically have this as US, but imagine if you can actually convert that into another environment through a simple purchase, and then you actually get a key, a derived key at your purchase time frame, and that actually turns into a derived key that is actually printed, not necessarily on the actual coin itself, but there's a clear case that it goes around that'll actually have it tied to it. So the ability to actually link serialization and cryptographic derived keys together is what's being realized here. Does that make sense?
That's insane. That's insane. But so I'm very visual.
Mhm.
So walk me through it. I have a silver coin,
Okay.
but I want a clear coin. So what's the process? What
So
do I do?
so this particular organization here is a bullion company. This bullion company is in the coin business, and it would actually purchase, let's say you have a Canadian gold that's a 2018, and let's say it goes for $38, okay? And you wanted to purchase a round that's here for 35. So you could actually convert this less shipping. So it would actually, and that's one of the reasons why a digital asset is going to be the way that the future is going to scale. Historically, silver and gold actually limited not only the deployment of assets, which, by the way, the silver dollar was the original dollar. It wasn't actually gold. And gold came in a little bit later on at a different value. And then we lost the gold standard in 1933, then went over to the oil standard. Whole nother conversation. But let's say you have $38 in US dollar value. Okay, so it's going to be converted from Canadian dollar value to US dollar. And the value here can then be put towards something here. So you can trade in, and then let's say you wanted to buy one and you actually wanted to take it out in different currency. Let's say you wanted to take it out in renminbi or mark or pounds or whatever. As we basically onboard these other regions, these other foreign exchanges and in digital assets, you'll be able to actually convert into those other environments. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I would take my Canadian silver coin, convert it to US, and I could purchase clear coin
Or
where I would get a digital certificate, and then I could take that from my wallet and load it onto my clear debit card if I wanted to.
yes, if you wanted to do it through currency and then digital, that is how you do it. There's another way to do it too, though. If
Oh,
you
what is
had silver from Canada,
Yep.
without going into USD, you could convert that Maple Leaf Canadian silver into a different silver asset that represented a digital asset. So you could literally trade in, like you would at a pawn shop. You could trade in your asset and convert it. And it's just like stamps or like baseball cards or any of these assets in the world where you could literally just convert them. And there's a real-time guide. There's real-time what the world has a known value around spot that everyone in the world actually recognizes. And I'll have some charts in future presentations that tie to that. And what's really nice is they're always continually, and I can't say, I won't make that statement always continually, but as long as we know that it's accretive, it's gone up in value, whereas the buying value of the US dollar or Canadian dollar or Australian dollar is all going the opposite way. Because why? These secret combinations, and this is not just crazy talk, the stuff we talk about every single week is real. These secret combinations are creating monetary policy within their Federal Reserves or different reserve banks and literally issuing something out of nothing. And the way they're doing it is with fractional bank lending. So if someone puts $1 into a bank, someone can loan out $10 for a loan of some sort. And when they loan it out and actually create it, they're issuing it out of nothing. So they're creating it out of nothing through people borrowing and using, so to speak. So literally this stops that.
So, so I guess I'm not asking the right question. The right question is, if I do this, if I take Canadian and go to a pawn shop or whatever, what I want is the digital certificate. I want to be decentralized. I want, a digital certificate. So how I couldn't is there going to be a clear pawn shop or a clear shop?
That's what I was trying to articulate earlier. There's two new businesses that are popping up. Clear Mint, which actually creates silver and gold coins and foil and bars, and Clear Bullion, which actually converts. It's like a pawn shop. So you can come in, sell a coin, and you don't have to pawn it. You could sell it like a coin shop. So think about a pawn shop, coin shop together in the Clear Bullion environment, and people can literally come in and say, I want to convert this and I want to get this. And then there's a digital receipt for it if they so choose. Or they can just go silver asset for silver asset and they're done. So there's.
But what would be what's the advantage of going, taking my coin and.
In certain states like Utah, where we are, Richard, myself, others, it's actually a part of the original constitution of the state that silver and gold is actually a currency in the Constitution. And so the question is, well, who actually accepts it? Can you pay your rent with it? Can you pay your power bill with it? And so what this does, and I think you've already figured this out, when you look at this chart here, sorry, I need to share. You guys always have to jump back over here. Let's see here. Share.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, you're good. So when you look at this model here, you basically see fiat currencies. Maybe someone has, their continued payroll. Maybe someone has retirement, whatever. They basically can convert their value into physical gold and silver that has a digital receipt as a representation for it. And then from there, there's a notary process, a titling process, a vaulting process, an insurance process. And then from there, they can actually, there can be credit that can be issued for loans and other things for people to be able to get into homes and autos. And then the digital reputation ties to that same thing. I don't know if that makes sense to folks, but in the United States, there's a credit agency as well as Australia and New Zealand and Canada. And they basically follow two different things. One is collecting data and one is running an algorithm on the data. In the United States, there's three main organizations, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, and they come up with a credit report for borrowing. This is going to have the same types of systems. Now, what's important is when we talk about some of these environments around credit, one of the goals is to actually create a full-blown new credit union. So this is actually a real credit union that is based upon international standards, but it is a digital credit union. So in the future, you'll be able to go to a web domain called clear.domain or clear.credit, and there'll be two different archetypes, people that actually want to put funds in and actually make money, and there's a certain archetype behind them, and then folks that actually want to build a digital reputation and then get credit. Now, all of this needs to be backed by real assets, not just some nebulous system. And this is what gets back to the original banking principles and value. So that's really where this is all going. Does this make sense? Go ahead.
Honestly, if people understood this, I don't see that people just wouldn't jump on this. Just this alone, I think is huge. But we just got to figure out a way to have people understand this, because people just don't.
And you know what I think is the way? It's what we're dealing with right now. I'm going to refresh this and see if it's changed. Right now, we're seeing Trump at 101, Harris at 71. Look at how fast she's coming up, though.
She
You
is.
seeing this? You seeing
Yep.
this? So remember, this is a live. We're all live. We're watching the elections roll live. And I've already made the prediction that this wonderful man that I believe should be president more than any other human that I know. He's dedicated his life. They've attacked him both morally, physically, spiritually, legally, lawfully, court-wise, as well as he's been trying to kill him. But I believe, even though that President Trump deserves another run in the White House, I believe, even though these elections are saying just the opposite, 71 to 101, and even before that, what was it? I canceled it. Let's see if I can see it over here. I'm not even sharing with you guys, so you're not even seeing this. But we were talking. This one was 8 to 3. Now this one was 19 to 3, 23 to 3, 95 to 35, and now we're looking at 101 to 71. Those ratios are shifting. You seeing this?
Yep.
And I don't want to just paint negative, because this doesn't need to be negative, but I'm very data driven and realistic. I mean, if I look at everything that Trump has done, he has run the best campaign I've ever seen. He's run the states multiple times, the rallies, the people, the energy, the heart. There's been some dumb comments from people that he's had on stage with him. But other than that, I mean, there's no reason why this man shouldn't be there. When you look at it from policy standpoint, from monetary standpoint, from peace standpoint, from I mean, he's led the industry, or at least the political landscape, when it comes to doing more with. I personally think when he was in for 4 years, he did more than all other presidents combined, as far as adding value and the things that he actually moved forward. I know that's probably an arrogant, biased perspective, but so let's just kind of screenshot these things as we go. So other thoughts or feedback? Anybody else?
I'm super excited, and I want to be on the team to get the information out there. No, I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious, because it's, it's simple. It's not simple because we've been on these calls forever, but if you just deal with this part of it, what you just showed us, I think it could be relayed in a way that would be very simple for people to understand. And I can't imagine people not jumping on this. I just can't. We just got to get it out there.
You know what's interesting is I felt the same way, where I just couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why people couldn't see it. And then, and I was told by a couple folks some real wise things around, timing, and, I always reminded of what my father-in-law would say, that time is the great healer and revealer, and that I've been able to see certain things, not because I'm ultimately it's because there needs to be an alternative way. And we were born, all of us on this call, especially Richard. I won't even ask you what year you were born in, Richard, but I know that Richard talked about, working on systems that are now in the Smithsonian, that they're so old and dusty. But we live in such an amazing time and generation, but also one that has massive responsibilities that go with it. And, in my whole life, I'd say I'm very responsible. There's one thing over the last year or so that I've just got to fix and make right. But other than that, this responsibility has to be realized, especially if these predictions are off. Who knows? Maybe we're going to switch up here and things are Trump's going to take off and win tonight. But Oh, he did. He just went up to 120, and Harris went from 75 to 99. So let's see, we're still at 53 to 45. So this will be fun to, what's interesting here in Utah, it's 7 o'clock where most of these things are actually running. It's 9 o'clock. They're supposed to have them in by midnight, which I believe that this election, they're not going to be in by midnight. They're going to take many days to get to this point, and we'll see. Any other thoughts or feedback, observations, concerns, questions?
Michael, I have just one question that's a little bit off topic from what we're talking about, but what council inside of the decentralized governance would prisons go under?
Usually those go under the interior of a typical governance system. So are you talking about prisons as in prisons for where people would be locked up?
Yeah, correctional facilities.
So what's interesting is we actually talked about this long ago, and that was one of the things that got carved out. That's like, people don't need to be in prisons like they used to be. Now, some people would say,
I guess that's why I'm asking that question.
Yeah, some people you break them into two separate categories. One where you've got civil and then criminal topics, and usually the criminal would be the ones where they're actually in confinement, and then you've got others that are just absolute terrible murderers and crazy stuff, like the stuff that they emptied all the prisons in South America and just put on planes and walked through to America. First off, I think that we're all here by choice. We're all on earth by choice. And, yes, we can make the wrong choices and we lose our freedoms and those types of things. But I also see a future with the folks that are in this camp over here where maybe they have a fine to pay or restitution to pay. And imagine, and this actually goes to a gentleman, I can't be honest with his full name just because of some of the things, but the same guy that actually created the Bitcoin logo, okay, so I'll just leave it at that, actually said to me, Mike, with your system, if you did this and this and this, you could do this and this and this for prisoners, and here's why. So imagine on one hand, you have someone that has a debt to pay to society. Instead of locking them up and feeding them and giving them clothes and housing and basic stuff that really all of us all want in life, a peace and rest and books and music and whatever, give them the opportunity to actually go out and add value, whether it's picking up dirt or trash or cleaning off walls, and they have to show up, take a picture, and as they show up and take a picture, it's time stamping it, but it also has a GPS to show that you stayed there for a period of time and then you left. And other people that may actually have a financial liability, remember those two different civil and criminal buckets? So again, taking the murderers out. Murderers are not a part of this conversation, but there's other folks inside. Maybe they've got, there could be a whole nother conversation around, drug paraphernalia or things like that. Because that's another thing I want to mention. This last week, did Ron Paul pass away? Does anybody know on the call? So Ron Paul is a very huge, I should know this. I mean, I made a couple comments on things, but for me, he was an example that changed my perspective. And one of the things, he was a doctor by trade, amazing man. He came out of the IT industry, which was the industry that I was in originally around centralized IT, managed support with Perot Systems and some of the things that he did and sold it. It was the same industry, similar industry. He did much bigger projects than we did. But some of the things that he taught me was around laws. And one of the things that I just scratched my head on was he said, just legalize all drugs. Let all drugs be legal. If people are going to put it in their body and ruin their body, they're going to learn real fast. And then it was like, well, what about people that are doing drugs and then driving around? Well, there's other consequences to that, right? And so, for instance, in New Zealand, some of the laws were you can't actually sue somebody if you're in an automobile accident and somebody dies or somebody gets hurt. You can't do it the same way that you do inside the United States, particularly when people think about messed up systems, they think about California. That's one of the reasons why what's happening is so terrible, because what's going on with Mrs. Harris with California ties to a lot of these free laws. So, they would basically open these elements up. For instance, they started allowing this drug use, but they did it to a point that was like, I am convinced, and I haven't done enough research to actually prove this, but I'm convinced that there is ways for these individuals to actually continually get the drugs. It's one thing to legalize and just say, hey, we're not going to just throw you in jail because you put this white powder or do this, smoke the marijuana or do this type of thing. By the way, I don't do drugs. I never have. I never will. But what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between legalizing something and then imprisoning someone for it versus actually legalizing it and then continuing to feed the habits and addictions until they lose all choice. And I think that's what this is all about, is choice, the ability to choose. And what, even with the simple prayer this morning, is like what we put into our eyes, into our ears, into our bodies, into our minds, the choice is really important. The choice is really important. I'm not saying that, what they're doing, but the prison side of it, back to the point, the prison side of it is someone could actually have, let's say, a financial liability versus a work. They could actually go do the work. So let's say somebody doesn't have money, but they have someone else has to do community service. They could go do the community service and then transfer digital assets back. So let's say this guy actually buys, let's say, Canadian digital dollars. And then they actually can convert those Canadian digital dollars to this guy that had paid the community service that then pays off the debt to society. So it's this beautiful loop that's all digitally done based upon a simple app. And so people can govern themselves. Does that make sense? You don't have to have a court that you go to court 4 times before you even know what's going on. And if you miss once, you basically, warrants out for your arrest, then you're pulled out of work, then you lose this and your name and they talk about, it's the opposite of pride. They talk about shame, the shame that ties with all of that stuff. It's just in society and culture, it's just wrong. So I hope I'm making sense with your question. It's a really good question. It's a hard question because in the environments that we're touching on, there's no physical rule environments. But to answer your original question, most of the law or prisons, because prisons fall under the legal, and there's a difference between legal and lawful. But that let's say sheriff has prisons that falls under the Interior ultimately. So what you would know in Australia, the Department of Interior, or here in the United States, the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Land Management, Indian Affairs, National Parks, and one other, all fall under the Department of Interior. What was also interesting is in a past life, we went and met with all the CTOs of those different departments in DC for the Department of Interior to outsource their IT. And we went through all this work. I don't know if you remember this, Wally or Al, but we went back, gave them all these proposals, and it made so much sense. But the end was they didn't buy off on any of it because it saved too much money and lost jobs. Now think about that. That is just the opposite of what was originally intended. And that is why I'm going to come back over and see how Mr. Trump is doing. So he was at 120. Let's see if he's still there. 120.99. Let's refresh. Yeah, 137.99. That's a good jump. That's a really good jump. So we're talking 53 versus 46. So.
Can you share?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I always do that. So here, I'll come back over and share. There we go. So what I was showing was this right here. So it went from here, 120 to 137. And Mrs. Harris stayed the same. So that's a big deal. Next question, thought, feedback, comment. Becca, did I answer your question, by the way?
Well, I did ask what counselor was, and you didn't. You said that.
I don't know. There is no.
You did say that.
Yeah,
you
there
did
is.
Say that. you took it out, which is fine,
There-
but
no,
you
you're
did
spot
answer
on.
it.
There is no particular council that's created today.
Yes,
'Cause
that's
we're
fine,
s-
but you did answer it.
Yeah, but normally within society, that's where it fits. But what's interesting is on Saturday, so today is Tuesday, so 5 days from today, we actually have one of the kingdoms has the same topic that's coming up, and they have physical land and they have physical governance and physical things they need to be doing. So this topic should come up there, and there's legislations for permits and certificates and like driver's licenses and passports and bunches of other things. Some of the things that's
Okay.
also advanced this last week that I didn't talk about is in the United States of America, a guy named David Will, who was actually he was the chair of New York Stock Exchange. He helped create what was called the Jobs Act, which basically facilitates Reg D offerings, Reg A offerings, Reg A plus offerings, which is how investment vehicles are basically done in early stage companies in the United States of America. And there's some advancement that's happening there. I can't go through all the details right now, but I'm so excited about it because I think it's actually the way to fund all of this, to fund these countries that actually want. It's the opposite of bonds. So if you think about bonds is where a country starts up, they have their land as asset, they have some other country that invests in them, and then they buy their bonds or treasuries, and then that helps facilitate cash flow to actually start growing. Like for instance, in 1933, when the United States lost its gold and silver standard, they basically went over to the oil standard, and they did a deal with the Saudi Arabians to say, hey, this is going to be the price for oil, make some money on it, but at the end of the year, any of your profits, you're basically going to buy U.S. Treasury bonds with. And so it's this good old boys club where it basically goes back and forth. So other thoughts or comments?
So what's missing to get these clear coins, bullion, whether it's US or Canada? What's missing to get that going? Is it a regulation or?
Well, there's basically 3 new businesses, and there is a large agreement, hundreds of pages of agreements. There is one thing I didn't mention, and this is so huge. Okay, so in the software development world, I'll come back over here. One of the things that is actually happening is, I can't believe I didn't even build something on this because it's just barely last night we figured it out. And it wasn't even me. It was one of the developing teams.
You're so cute.
I woke up at the middle of the night and they're like, we built this. And I was like, well, why'd you do that? And then I started thinking, and I fell asleep, and then I woke up. I was like, if we can do that with, so this is what it is. Okay, you ready? So they basically figured out how to take, we didn't want to use a non-standard, like our normal MO is to go and get a thing called open source, open standards, living the law of consecration of software development. And in the commerce world, it would be WooCommerce that's actually the standard for that. But we chose to do it off of Shopify. So Shopify is the #1 platform in the world shopping wise. WooCommerce is like number 2 or 3 or 4. But the point is the engineers said, we can't do this and this and this. When they make the purchase to issue the derived key and then issue the asset, we can't do it the way that they're currently doing it. So what we're going to do is build an app. They didn't even ask me. They just started building the apps, and which is great. I love it when people just think and do, especially these teams, because they usually just force you to think, and so here's the point. This is a long-winded one. They're building an app in the Shopify ecosystem that when someone makes a purchase with a Shopify catalog item, you can get a digital asset, which means anybody with a Shopify store and asset can actually get digital receipts and make purchases.
Anybody
So
with a shop?
so if anybody's selling with the Shopify store can actually use a digital asset now. So for instance, there's a guy named Mike, what's his name, El? Mike, he's out of Texas. He's a health ranger. I should know this
Oh,
because I met
Mike Evans.
Mike Adams. I went and met with Mike Adams, and this was one of 2 tasks that he actually tasked me with, because he's got all these health products, and he's like,
Yes.
we want to be able to use these assets. And so, I don't know, 4 months ago, I tasked this team with it. They never did it. Now, fast forward, here we are, and they're actually using that same requirement to actually issue some of these other tech. And what it's going to do is it's going to be able to not just work for, and we ended up naming it. We ended up naming it the Clear Shopping app. That's what it's going to be called, the Clear
Okay.
Shopping app. It'll be at the URL of clear.shopping, and it will be called the Clear Shopping app. And you can get it on Shopify if you want to take digital payments. One other thing that's happened this last month in October 2024, Stripe paid $1 billion for a company. Al, what was the name of the company that they bought? I forget. Anyways, they don't do the same thing. It's very different. But I believe that some of the stuff that we're doing will actually help to facilitate that. Stripe is the biggest payment platform. Shopify is the biggest shopping platform. When you dig into the roots, you actually find some very interesting history. Both of them were funded by Google. Stripe is actually from Peter Thiel, which was actually who actually has tied into the vice president associated with this election. Let's see where it's at. By the way, we're 177 for Mr. Trump here. And now we are saying 177. So I'll bet you the next bump is going to be Harris. She's still at 99. Boy, Trump is 53%. Harris is 46%. This sure looks like Trump's going to win it, doesn't it? I sure hope I'm wrong.
God willing. Okay, so I go to the Health Ranger store.
Yep.
And I purchased something.
Imagine
So
if you actually go and he wants to use digital assets to be able to allow things to be purchased. Imagine you could buy it, but you could actually buy it with your digital Canadian dollar.
oh my God. Oh my God.
That's it right there. It took me 5 paragraphs to say one thing, but that's basically the outcome right there. So.
Wow. Okay. So when? When?
These guys, I actually sent a message off earlier today with a screenshot of how far we were in May and June. And I was like, guys, I feel like we got to get this over. And to their defense, there's a lot of complexities to it. And we've actually had a lot of other issues that have actually slowed down this to that. But we're learning lessons along the way. And I think that's the key is we're learning them so that they can actually be stood up, even if we're not involved. So if bills aren't paid, if systems aren't up, if code's not there, there's still redundancies for future generations, because those are the types of environments we're assuming through. So,
I just realized why I keep asking you when, and I just realized that I'm actually afraid that it'll be too late, that we're going to be completely 100% enslaved without what you've created, without what you have created. It's funny. That was like the penny just dropped for me. Why am I so anxious? And that's what it is, Michael.
I felt the same way, and I had to come to this realization that majority of society doesn't see it. They don't care. They don't understand. They don't get bothered by the fact that they're enslaved.
But you want to know why, Michael? Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because just like what Harris has been doing, she's been screaming from the rooftops that Trump is a racist, he's a Nazi, he's a dictator, he's a fascist, she's been screaming it from the rooftops, and he hasn't.
Mm-mm.
He hasn't. the one who screams the loudest, and that's the way mind control works. You know, the narrative, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. I mean, we heard those words ad nauseum, and people believe it. So we, as your clear community, need to start screaming from the rooftops, but real, clear, concise words that a 12-year-old could understand.
Have you noticed how clear is kind of in the middle of all of it? So for instance, even Mrs. Harris's conversations, most of her phrases start out with, "Let me be clear."
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yes, but
Or there's others like with bricks. They named it Bricks Clear. You know, so it's very interesting how all of this stuff is going to play together. And I won't say this other one out loud because there's so much repercussions with it. But I believe that there will be a future where all of us, and that's why Clear is so important. It's not owned by anyone, not by me, it's all of ours, and humanity can actually benefit from it. And imagine if people can actually get their identity back, but still prove who they are. Imagine when you get on a plane, you don't even need to show your ID.
I know.
It's already done. And so by me, without even saying anything specific, if you just listen to those last couple sentences, it should spell it out. So I believe that there will be a day where it will all come together. You know, I sat down with an individual today that is we wouldn't be here without him. I wouldn't be here without him. And things, you all live in society, you all see the pressures, you all see the concerns.
Yeah.
And they're as hard as I think, it's not as hard as they could be, but it's hard. Especially with the way that we're building this. We're not building it with tons of money. You know, even though we've put on almost $30 million so far, sometimes I scratch my head and say, where did all this come from? How did we do it all? And how, 15 years and all the parts and pieces and just it's blessings everywhere and doors that come open. But a lot of it is because there's certain core folks that are just faithful and continue forward in faith. And I don't know what's going to happen here. I sure hope that this continues to light up. Other thoughts, feedback?
Just to what Danielle said, technology is generational, which if we don't do that transgenerational thinking between our age gaps and kind of what's being polarized in one's mind as well, also plays a huge part in why people, don't know, they're not educated in certain areas. I personally go and mentor STEM and innovation classes for 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. And the minds of the 11, 12, and 13-year-olds compared to probably like when I was younger is just phenomenal. Like they want to do these amazing things in their schools with AI but you can't just go and do that. Like you have to plan it out. You have to, how is it going to impact maybe like the groundskeeper who doesn't know anything about technology, and he has to learn from the younger generation, and they have to have that cross-sector mentoring, between the two. So that's kind of what I experience about, in technology. I do think it's generational. Yeah. I do love decentralization because it offers more. The decentralized digital world technology, it expands out our knowledge, our businesses, what we can do and collaborate together with each other instead of being inside of these boxes that we often have been mentally put in, these mental constructs in society. Yeah.
I think that
I totally agree with, sorry.
Yeah, no, Danielle, I totally agree with Becca. But I think that the difference between before all of us on this call were born, there was no internet, there was no cell phones. And the internet and the cell phones are a pretty big difference. But I believe that the difference that decentralization, if it's implemented correctly, is actually exponentially more important for humanity. It may not have the kind of impact of we didn't have cell phones and weren't connected. But I believe that as we become more connected, I mean, look at what Starlink enables. 1 to 3% of the world we live on in communities and homes, and we occupy it. The rest of the 97%, we can now live in because of a connectivity around Starlink. Those types of advancements within a generation are big, but I don't think that humanity understands the importance of decentralized systems. And I believe it's actually going to traverse generations. And that is why it takes so long and why it's so complicated, because we have to develop in such a way that even if we die, everyone on this call is no longer here, the next generations can still pick it up and get it to work. And I believe that's why we're going through the timeframes and the lessons that we're going through right now. Like literally today is a very good example of both of those things that are happening. By the way, Trump just jumped up to from 177 to 178. I don't know who's worth 1 point in all of this, but let's go see if we
You know
can
what,
find out.
Michael? You know how you've been talking about how we can vote with our dollars, and you've been saying this for many months now, starting with Hawaii Life. But tonight, this conversation with the gold and the silver and the digital receipt and all that, I think that that's an easier way to sensitize people to decentralization. If you're talking, if you bring this whole digital, the coins and the digital certificates and all that to people, and I think that people of all ages could grasp that before they decentralization. Michael, it took me a long time. I mean, I'm not a very I'm a little bit technologically challenged. I'm not good like Becca and a lot of people, but I am comfortable with it. And it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around decentralization. And you've been in it for so long, it's like breathing air to you. But for most, it isn't. But this whole currency money thing that you're coming up with, I think would be a really easy way to start the conversation about decentralization. I think that's something that everybody could grasp because we all use money.
So that resonates with you, the whole money side of it, huh?
100%. I see how I could easily go out there and share that with people. I can't do the decentralization. I get it with every bone in my body. I get everything you're doing. But for me to articulate it, for me to explain it in a coherent way to people, I can't. But the whole money, 100%, the whole gold, silver, foil, digital receipt, exchange, loading my debit card. I can totally explain that to somebody.
Wow. Okay. Well, that makes a big difference. That's very eye-opening, and I appreciate you turning that light on. It's a big deal. Because even one of the conversations we had earlier today, I thought, I didn't say this is a stupid business around gold and silver, but it's not complicated. Whereas building cell phones like we've done, that's complicated. I mean, I don't know if you heard Joe Rogan and Elon Musk last night, but they talked about how he's like, I don't even want to go there. I build spaceships and rockets and all this crazy stuff. And he's like, I don't want to touch them. And I really feel like, if they're able to get in, whether Trump or Harris, whoever's president, it doesn't matter. We are going to go and try and fill that void around providing an alternative, a real alternative to Apple and Google that is decentralized. Some of the other things we've been working on is actually manufacturing them here in the United States of America, which we'll talk a lot more about, but there's agreements that have been signed and
Love it.
exclusively doing it, and big stuff, big stuff. So that's coming as well. What's that?
See, I can totally see how Trump would get on board with that, because he's talking about bringing everything back to the US. And if not, he's going to tariff the heck out of people.
Well, it just so happens that 30 acres of land in Florida was given to us to do it. Like
Oh,
literally.
really?
Like literally. We were actually looking between Utah and Texas, and the team members that were over this, and they're a partner that's actually done this for a very long time. Not out of China, not out of South Korea, not out of Taiwan, not out of Japan, not out of Hong Kong, but an amazing part of the world. And now it's out of little old United States of America. The first phones that'll go out won't be until 2026, but that's going to be some big news there. So, and then we're even getting exclusivity as well as the ability to work. That's another thing. This last week, we found out that we lost 2 million phones deal where T-Mobile went direct and cut us out, blah, 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 and a whole nother conversation, but it is what it is. And there's just some really neat realities that are being faced. Let's go ahead and check back in, and then we'll take last questions and wrap up for the night. So we're at 178, and Mr.
There,
Trump.
your screen. We want to see it.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry, here, I'm coming. Okay.
This has been a great conversation.
I think you just love it because we're actually watching these elections in real time,
Yeah.
This is cool to see. There's other channels that are doing it. So this is Google's. So you can see they're still at the same thing. These are the normal mainstream. Actually, the mainstream has him higher. Kamala at 62 and Trump at 168. That's a good
Wow,
one. We'll grab a screenshot of that one. Let's come back and save that, and then come over here and refresh. Yeah, so that was dynamic. And then what's
Wow.
over here? 178 versus 99. So that race to the electoral votes, Trump is chunking it. That's so awesome.
God, I hope.
Well, any other thoughts or feedback or comments? If not, we will ask Wally Randolph to provide a closing prayer tonight as we go into this night around the elections. I don't know how many we deal with within our lives. I guess if you live 80 years, you'd have, I guess it's every 4 years. So it's not very often, 20 of these in a lifetime. But well, if you can hear me, can you hear me okay? Wallace? Maybe not. I was going to ask him if he could give us a prayer tonight. If not, I can offer a prayer. I've never actually prayed on these things before.
We need to tonight.
Yeah, for sure. Wally, are you there, bud? Okay, I'll go ahead and. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before thee this day and we give thanks for the many blessings that we've all been given here on earth, these bodies and these minds, and the opportunity for our spirits to be able to learn for choice and for freedom. Help us to know and understand what is right for us individually and collectively, whether it's our families or whether it's our own individual choices in life. Help us to be in the right place, doing the right things, focused on things that may be thy will, that are thy will. We're grateful for the knowledge and simple truths that we've been blessed with. We're grateful for the forefathers that left one environment to start another. We're grateful for the forefathers that started the Americas, the United States of America. We're grateful for the examples that they set and for the dedication that they had, and for all the many other countries that were able to realize freedom from the Declaration and Constitution that was blessed for so many, for the freedom of speech and for the freedom of religion. Heavenly Father, on this day, help us as humanity. Help votes to be realized, honesty to be had, choice to be understood. As we go into the next 12 hours, help there to be peace. We're grateful for the opportunity to have turmoil, to have right and wrong, and to learn. We're grateful for the simple truths that we've all been blessed with. May we understand the importance of those blessings. And we say these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Good night, everybody.